silly son of a bitch. I said, you're going to get us killed. So that was the end of that. We knew where, see, there was Gus and his wife and a daughter. And that was all of the family. Well, the girl and the mother had to get out of the house when they started wrecking it, you know. And they went to some friends of theirs, and they stayed with them. And Pete knew where they were. So we went up to that house. And we had the oak chest and a whole great big stack of clothes that we took off the.
Ever have any regrets about doing that? Any second thoughts? Are you glad you did it?
No, I'm glad that I was able to do it. I'd do it again if I was able.
Yeah. Well, now that was after, had you been in the service by then, do you think? The first time?
John, I couldn't I don't think so. No.
Well, when did you go in the service?
When the hell did I go in the service? I don't know.
Was it for the Second World War?
Oh yeah. I was in Paris when the war ended. When the war ended? 1945?
1945.
Huh?
1945.
Well, I went over there. See, I spent damn near a year in England, and then very close to a year in Paris.
Were you in the Army or the Air Force?
Army.
Army, Air Force?
No.
Just Army.
Plain old Army.
What were you doing for them then?
I was with the AG Casualty Division.
What'd you do for them?
We kept records of everybody that was killed or wounded. And we had lots of them. Somebody had to take them records. Mm-hmm. They had me scheduled. We come down from Scotland on a train, and I don't know where we were. We stopped like overnight or something. And there was about 40 of us, and we were slated for the combat engineers. And they, for some reason, they come out, and they took about 10 of us, I think. And they shoved us down to a town called Cheltenham. And that's where this Casualty Division was. That they needed men to,
keep records.
And oh Christ, I was sure tickled to death to get out of that goddamn combat engineers, I'll tell you. Well, the combat engineers on D-Day, how many of them come home? Very few.
And what got you into Paris?
They moved us over there. And the goddamn war was still on, John. And they loaded us all up in those, what are them? DC-9s? Is that what they are?
DC-3s probably.
I don't know. They loaded us all up in them with all our belongings, and a lot of those, there must have been 20 of those planes, or at least that many. And we flew over there. And I thought, when we were going over, Jesus, we're sitting ducks, some German guy that's running loose up there. Christ, he'd make a killing. He knocked us down there like pigeons. It was all right. We didn't have any trouble. But the war was still on, and it was on goddamn strong. And we landed at Le Bourget, and then went into Paris, and they set up a place for us. We had it was like I don't know, I think it was a big home. Anyway, we stayed there until the war was over.
And you came straight home to Butte?
I did not.
Where'd you go after the war?
Well, I got a furlough. After the war was over, they gave me a furlough. And I went to Ireland.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I think of that, I didn't know nothing. What the hell did I know? You had to go from Paris to the coast to Dieppe. And I got a ferry and went across to England. And then from that ferry, I took a train up to London. And I knew a guy that was stationed in London. And I looked him up, I got a hold of him. And he said, there's always somebody vacant, moving out. Somebody, Grace, he said, stay here with me in our mess hall. So I stayed there for 3 days until I got the papers straightened out. They were only leaving 7 GIs at a time per week, I think it was, into Southern Ireland.
Oh, they were limiting the GIs going to Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
So I went by rail to Wales, Fishguard, and got another ferry, and then went across to Ireland. Landed in, used to be Queenstown, they call it Cove now. Landed there. Wait a minute.
Did you know where you were going?
No.
So how did you find out where your family was from?
Well, I knew from talking to my grandfather where he was from. So I went out there. In fact, I got a hold of a fellow that had a taxi. He wasn't running around town with a taxi, but he had a car. I paid him. I had enough money to do it. We went out and saw the place.
What did it look like?
Oh, I could see why he left Ireland. That come to me real quick. Anybody would leave that. Oh, it was a terrible place. And I've got a book about that. You read the conditions that those people were in. Terrible, terrible conditions.
What do you remember of it? What was the impression?
It was, I enjoyed it, and everybody was good to me, everybody was nice.
But did you actually see the house that they came from?
Oh no. It might have been a cow shed that was being used by somebody that was living in that area. That's as near as I could figure anyway. But I did get out, and now that Alley's is not too far from there, over just a ways. And I went over there, and that's where Tim Shea and Pete Shea came from. And their sister was still living there, and I visited with her.
Now, who's Tim Shea?
Well, Tim was one of my best friends. He lived up on East Woolman. He had a son, Robert, that was a priest. They're both dead, in fact, the priest and him.
Was the priest the one killed in the car accident?
No, he just plain died. Robert was his name. And then Pete Shea, he was a crack drift miner around the mines. I got very well acquainted with him too.
Now, what's a drift miner?
I was driving,
Just moving
Yeah. And Pete was a cracker guy. What they call, he topped the board. The Ouija board was put up every week and for the contractors. And it showed how much they made. And Pete was one of those crack grip miners. And he, what they say, topped the board.
He's a contract miner.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,